As we discussed in the introductory video, learning in formal settings, such as a university classroom, does not come easily or naturally for many students. But you have become a teacher because you want to help students learn. So how can you ensure that students will benefit from the course you have created for them? By the end of this first lesson, you should understand 3 essential stages of the learning process and recognize how to apply some basic theories of learning to the creation of a course or even an individual class session. That knowledge will help you create courses that ensure and promote learning in your students. To help you better understand the learning that students will do in your courses, we'll separate the process into 3 separate stages or features. The first stage is the prior knowledge or mental models that students bring into your courses. The second stage will be the first exposure that students receive to your course material. And the third stage will be the reinforcement that they will need to retain that material for the future. In more simple language, we might think about these 3 stages in terms of what students must do before learning new knowledge or skills, during the learning process, and after their initial learning. As we will see, what happens in each of these stages has a major impact on whether your students learn and whether they retain what they have learned after they leave the classroom or finish your course. Professors frequently assume that students coming into their courses are blank slates, that they do not know anything about the subject matter and are ready to absorb something completely new from the class. So a faculty member teaching inorganic chemistry might assume that students know nothing about the subject matter, and so can simply begin with basic principles and continue from there. This assumption is only partially true. While students are not experts in your subject matter, they will always come into our courses with at least some prior knowledge of our discipline or subject matter. They may know very little about civil engineering, for example, but they will at least have encountered the ideas or the work of your discipline in some form. They will have walked in cities, driven on roads, been stuck in traffic, all activities which connect to civil engineering. Their life experiences or their prior learning in school will have created what learning theorists call mental models of your discipline that they bring into your classroom. We all have mental models that guide our behavior, our thinking, and any new learning we undertake. I have a mental model of how cities are designed, of how animals reproduce, of how motion works. I've pieced together these models from my experiences in life and from my learning in school. Your students will have these models as well. The problem is that when we form a mental model of something, we don't like to change it. So if I have a mental model of how cities are designed, based only on my life experience, I will bring that model to your civil engineering class and try to understand what you are teaching based on my existing mental model. I'll try to use what I already know in order to understand what you are teaching. But the mental models that students bring into our courses are usually wrong or incomplete, and we want to change them. In order to do so, we must first understand what those mental models look like. If we don't attempt to understand first the mental models of our students, they may simply take our course material and attempt to push it into their existing mental models, like trying to push a square peg into a round hole. Therefore, before we begin teaching something to students, we should always seek to understand and address the prior understanding or knowledge they bring to our courses. We can do this at the beginning of a new course, at the beginning of a new unit in a course, or even at the beginning of an individual class session. If students have strong and accurate mental models of our subject matter, that process will help them remember and use that knowledge. If they have weak or mistaken mental models, this process will allow you to recognize and challenge those models with the design of your learning. After you have brought the prior knowledge of your students to the surface of their minds and addressed it with the kinds of in-class activities you will learn more about in later units of this course, you will provide your students with first exposure to the content of your course. First exposure happens when students encounter the material for the first time. This can happen in many forms, through readings, through videos, through lectures in class, or more. Most faculty think about first exposure as the primary work of teaching, and so devote all of class time to providing that first exposure to the course content. The classroom can indeed provide an ideal space for first exposure, especially if you remember two important principles. First, student learning will improve if they receive first exposure through a variety of learning activities. In other words, we don't want to provide first exposure through lectures only, or through readings only, or through videos only. We want to provide it in as many different forms as possible. The more ways in which we have to process and understand new information, the more likely we are to learn and remember it. Consider the process of learning a second language. You can learn something of a second language by studying a book. You will learn more if you study your book and use a language program on your computer. You will learn even more if you study your book, use a language program on your computer, and study with a teacher. You will learn the most if you do all of these things and immerse yourself in conversations with native speakers. Similarly, in your course, students need multiple forms of first exposure to new material if they are to learn that material as deeply as possible. So you might assign students to complete readings or watch videos outside of class before they come to the course, as many faculty do in the flipped classroom. You might then provide short mini lectures in class to help them better understand the most essential points from those readings or video lectures. After that, you might ask students to put their new knowledge to work by answering clicker questions, solving problems in groups, or identifying real-world examples of key concepts from the course. Finally, you might assign them homework activities that will continue their exposure to the new content they have just learned. The second key principle to guide first exposure is that students need help organizing new knowledge and connecting it to what they already know and what they will learn in the future. As an expert in your field, you have a rich network of connections between all of the things you know about your discipline. Experts have thick tapestries weaving together all of the many things they know. New experiences are threaded easily into that tapestry, continually expanding and reshaping it. Experts also have their knowledge organized effectively and clearly in ways that help them access that knowledge and apply it to new contexts. By contrast, new learners do not have a strong understanding of how to organize new knowledge in your course. They also tend to have information, ideas, or skills lodged in their minds in discrete, isolated places. Connections or structures that might seem obvious to professors may never occur to students. And while we can help students by giving them suggestions for how to organize their knowledge and make connections, true learning occurs when students make new connections on their own. Your first exposure activities in class, then, should help support the ability of students to organize and connect what they are learning. We will see examples in later units of this course about how to use your class time to support both of these key principles, introducing a variety of learning methods into the course and helping students organize and connect their learning. The final step in the learning process is the reinforcement of new knowledge. As we all know from our own experiences, our students can learn things for very short periods of time and then forget them very quickly. For new knowledge to remain in the minds of our students, they have to participate in activities that will reinforce it after they have received their first exposure to new content. Research from the learning sciences tells us about a key concept for the reinforcement of new knowledge: retrieval practice. If students want to remember new information or ideas, or retain cognitive skills like writing or speaking or problem solving, they have to practice remembering it. Learning scientists call this act of retrieving knowledge or skills from our memories retrieval practice. The more times we engage in retrieval practice of something we have learned, the longer we will retain it. Retrieval practice can begin immediately after first exposure and then continue throughout the semester. Some research suggests, for example, that the first efforts of retrieval practice should happen very soon after first exposure. So, some faculty ask students at the end of a class period to write down in their notebooks the most important concept they learned that day or the most important skill they learned that day. This simple act of retrieval practice, which can take just 2 minutes at the end of class, will provide an immediate learning boost for your students. A second common means of helping students engage in retrieval practice is frequent, low-stakes quizzes or other assessments. A significant body of research has shown that quizzes and tests, in addition to checking the learning of our students, can actually improve their learning. We will again consider in-class activities that help to reinforce learning in later units of this course. But keep in mind the following essential principles that will help reinforce what students have learned in your course. Learning improves when students have frequent opportunities to retrieve knowledge or skills from their memories. As you continue through the rest of this course and work on your course design, assessments, and classroom activities, continue to reflect upon how you can help support your students through all 3 stages of the learning process: before they learn, while they are learning, and after they have learned.